Hi, Armored Pants here, and I have another review for you in the Russian line, the TD, the Tier 10 Object 268. And as always, we have a complete guide, and we will look at this using blitzhanger.com to review the tech spec. Now, this is the tank up from the 704. In many ways, and it's an interesting comment by one of my subscribers in New Jersey, that perhaps this is not as good in its tier as the Object 704 is in its own tier in Tier 9. And that's probably true, actually, because this has a little bit of characteristics which make it, I believe, inferior to the Object 704, but I mean that's per tier, obviously. For example, this does bigger alpha rolls, etc. The main difference being that its gun handling is not as good as the 704 because it's significantly lower muzzle velocity, and for a TD, muzzle velocity is extremely important, right? Because one of the key jobs of a tank destroyer is to fire from distance. And if you've got lower muzzle velocity, it means it lowers your chance of penetration, and it also makes deflection shooting more difficult. Now, as this has really low muzzle velocity, without supercharge it's 760 meters per second, and even with supercharge it's below 1000 meters per second, so really low for a tier 10 and really low for a tank destroyer. Therefore you need to understand deflection shooting, even more so than you did with the 704 before it. If you need a refresher course on that, go and look at the TD guide we have on channel, and you will get an update there. Now, it is a fast tank. It does almost 50 kilometers per hour and almost 20 in reverse, so it's very agile as well. It has good traverse too. What does that mean for you in terms of tactics? Well, it means that it opens up more tactics for you than just being a simple TD sitting behind, because you're so fast you can move around the map. Now, one of the things it has, like the 704, is this angled armour at front. This tank successfully passed trials but never went into mass production. But you can see what they were trying to achieve with the angled front here. It is very angled, and therefore it will get bounces. It has good armor profile on the front as well, so you will get some bounces. Because it's significantly quick in reverse, if you fire, move back and wiggle the front of the tank, the nose of the tank, you will get bounces because of those acute angles. So keep that in mind. Fire, pull back, move the snout, create those awkward relative armor angles, and you get bounces. As you can see, though, at the back and at the sides, it's very vulnerable on the butt and the back of the turret in particular. It does have spaced armor on the sides, which will save you from HE and heat shots, but of course it's not covering the tracks. As you can see, when we add in the external modules, the tracks are exposed. Therefore, I would highly recommend you use 2 repair kits, because you do not want to get stuck out in the open when you're vulnerable at the sides and the back, because you're dealing with the biggest guns in the game at tier 10 and tier 9, and you can be easily one-shotted by so many of those. You can see here, by the way, if you are going downhill or uphill, how vulnerable the top of the tank is. Why is this significant, and more so for a TD than any other tank type? Well, because in a TD you're often moving up to elevated positions for sniping, right? And therefore you're moving up or moving down those elevated positions more than you are, let's say, in other tank types. For example, in a heavy tank you may never move up on top of a hill, right? But in a TD it's part of your gameplay, and not in every game but certainly in many games, and therefore you need to be aware of how vulnerable you are moving up and down those hills. And you're very vulnerable in this tank, so therefore be careful moving up and down hills unless you know where the big guns are in the other team, unless you know it's safe, because you can get one-shotted very easily through the top of this tank. Now, in terms of tactics, obviously the standard TD tactics apply for this tank. Sitting at the back, you know, supporting your enemy, supporting your allies by hitting the enemy, letting your lights and meds spot up for you, and just firing. But because this tank is quick, does almost 50 kilometers an hour, you can also move with your medium tanks if you so wish. You can keep up with them, bring your gun in and fire, stay behind them and fire as they perhaps go to flank. You can also do base capture. You can also relocate later on in the game as the game requires. As for example, you see your meds are in trouble on one flank, you can move up to support them. Or if you know you're down in there's a 3 ranks versus 2 left in a game, you can move and support your remaining allies. So it does give you more options. It's not a slow, cumbersome TD where you move into position like, for example, the Jagdpanzer, the Jagaru, the E100. Where you're kind of stuck in one pocket of the map for the whole game, because this tank is agile and can move around. So just be aware of that. Don't just sit in a TD position, even if it's a good one. Now let's have a look at the in-game setup that I use in this tank, as I've often got requests to specifically show how I set up the tank. As I mentioned, because this tank has this low muzzle velocity, I'm going to use supercharge and refined gun. But that's part of my gameplay. I normally, and most tanks with a few exceptions, use gun rammer, supercharge and refined gun. You can see here that I'm using the condensed milk to get up to view range, because I believe that's important in a TD. Because of the big 152mm gun, you don't really need so many Pramo, so therefore I've only got 5 heat rounds loaded up. Most are AP, and of course I've got a lot of HE loaded up, because you've got that 90mm of pen on the HE, which is very important. And you can see here the setup. I'm also using improved assembly to get those extra hit points, because it has low hit points for tier 10. And I believe if you're going to get a bounce on the angles, you're going to get them anyway. You don't need the extra 5% possibility using enhanced armour. I'm using engine accelerator and toolbox, and I'm also using view range. I want that view range maximized because I'm in a TD. I believe that's important when you play a TD, more important than camo net. But that's just my own particular way of setting up a TD. Other players who are as good, if not better than me in TDs, would say they set it up differently, but this is just my opinion and the reasons why I do it like this. Using the engine accelerator, you can see that you maximize the you're not maximizing, but you're increasing the traverse speed as well. So I use 2 repair kits, obviously, and adrenaline too, because as I said, I do not want to get stuck out in the open in this. As you can see here, it has fantastic angles on the front of this tank, which we looked at in the tech spec. It's a mean looking ombre as well, and of course it is a low profile target. It's difficult to hit, and if you're moving at 50 kilometers an hour, it's not an easy target to hit. The one thing about it though, as a TD, as we look at this mastery game here, is that the low muzzle velocity, and as I said, even with supercharged, less than 1,000 kilometers per second, 1,000 meters per second, sorry, means that shooting over distance is difficult in this tank, and it's more difficult than it was in the Object 704, because you've got a 150 meter per second slower shell, and HE rounds are even slower. So you'll see in this game that because I've been playing the 704 before this, I actually miss a few shots that I would have hit in the 704 because of the slower shell velocity. So just be aware of that. Of course, as you get used to playing this tank, that will counterbalance, because you'll get naturally used to deflection shooting using this. But basically with deflection shooting, you have to aim in front of the target, so therefore the target drives into your shell, and that's more difficult the slower the shell is. Okay, simple basic mechanics and mathematics and physics. But you can see here at short distances the gun is very good. It's reliable, there's good gun handling at short distances, but it has a short barrel for a TD in tier 10, as you can see, and therefore that means the muzzle velocity is lower, and over distance you will encounter some problems, and you will see that in this game. So just be aware of that, be cognitive of that, and try to correct for that during the game, and maybe have a look at the TD guide again to have a look at deflection shooting and how you should do that. Because normally when you go through the tiers, you get a superior gun as you move up from tier 9 to 10, or from 8 to 9 or whatever, but here this gun is inferior in terms of its long distance handling to the 704's gun, even though it is this very similar 152mm cannon. So anyway, just be aware of that. Again here, because it has quite a long reload time, significantly over 12 seconds, 12.6 seconds. Tanks shot selection is very important, so that's why I waited on that E100. It also has relatively long aiming time. Now, having said that, I do try a spec shot here to see if I can take out the E100. It doesn't work. You'll see why he pops back into view here, and you'll see why I missed him. But what I would say is that you need to take your time with these. Don't try snapshots unless you're really sure of it in this tank, because that low muzzle velocity increases the chances of you missing. Just in terms of the low muzzle velocity, just look at the time that elapsed between me firing that round and the damage being inflicted on that T11. Significant. You can actually see when we slowed it down, you can actually see the shell moving across the valley. So that is a very good reflection of the of the low muzzle velocity. You can actually see it there in action. In terms of tactics in this game, as you saw, I checked the setup and I moved to support my team going to A. We effectively cleared off and captured there. And then I moved into this classic TD position on this map. If you've watched the 704 review, you'll see this is a very similar game. I almost used the same tactics exactly in the game. So just kind of showing that it does work. Now, there you see a fluffed shot on the ST1, and it's due to that lack of muzzle velocity and me not again, I missed that E100 again. That guy should buy a lottery ticket this week. Just flashed by him there with the HE round, which would have taken him out. This time I'm going to go for a heat right into the bottom of the tank, because the heat round has faster muzzle velocity than the HE round. Just want to make sure I get him. Now we're down to 4v2. We're just going to go to 2v2 because these two guys kind of know what they're doing, and they are going to take out two of our tanks, and we end up in a 2v2 situation. So going from a very comfortable position to a very uncomfortable or less comfortable position. Again, you're going to see a miss here, and if you slow that down, watch this shell. It goes right past them there. See that? That's the slow muzzle velocity in action again. And because I'd been playing the 704 before this, that would have hit in the 704, missed with this, and that's that difference of that 150 meter per second muzzle velocity. That and the 704, that shell would have smashed into the side turret of that ST1. So I didn't allow as much deflection as I should have with that shot, and that's the fluffed shot you see there. Now, in terms of decision making, I could have just sat where I was sitting in this game, but instead I decided to use the speed of my tank to move and to engage the enemy. I have full hit points, I've conserved my hit points, so now I can get into hit point trading if necessary. See a nice alpha roll on the ST1 there, and look at this bounce here. This is what I'm saying about if I had just sat in front of the ST1, but instead of I move back, and I'm on a slight angle, and I'm also on that hill, creating a really awkward angle. I get a massive bounce off the Death Star, and that's the kind of bounces you can get in this tank. Of course, you need a little bit of luck, but by creating those angles, you increase the chances of you getting that piece of luck. Smash one into him there, drops the adrenaline, and now I'm just going to take him out. And I was quite prepared to go then and engage the FE myself, the Death Star, but actually my ally comes along and takes him out. So we clear off, so in the end we win 2-0 and have a good win in the end, and deliver a mastery game in the Object 268, which you will see the results of here now coming up. So there we go, almost 5.5k of damage, almost 1.4k of XP, which is what delivers the mastery badge, of course. As we always said, it's not about damage or number of kills, even though there's 3 kills delivered in this game. When you have a look at the efficiency here, was engaged in 5 of the 7 enemy tanks, which is a good return, especially in a TD, where you're not usually a frontline player. And then we see the XP, almost 1.4k of base XP, which delivers the mastery badge, and I get the high caliber badge as well. Sniper tanker eluded me as not like the Object 704, and that was because of the mistakes I made with the deflection shooting there. I didn't allow enough deflection or enough space for me to margin of error for me to hit. But anyway, nonetheless, a decent game in the Object 268 Chaser, and a good result delivered. Happy enough with that. So let's have a quick recap on this really good tank destroyer, although as I said, probably a little bit inferior per tier than its counterpart in tier 9. So it's a good TD. The gun is excellent, but on short distance in particular, it's not great when you move up to those longer distances, and you saw several examples of that in the game. But of course you can allow for that with deflection shooting, we just need to be aware of it. It's a tough competitor, it's a decent brawler. With those angles, if you're front onto somebody, they will bounce off you, plus you're a low profile target. It's pretty mobile, has good traverse, which also helps with the brawling. The angles of the front armor, max them out. When you fire, move back, wiggle the snout, and you will get bounces, as you saw there on the one on the Death Star. Don't sit still, make it easy for them. 152mm gun has big alpha rolls, as you saw in that game, but again, poor handling over distance. 12.6 second reload, as I said, is significantly over 12 seconds, so be aware of that. Make your shots count. and you need to know how to use deflection shooting. I gave you demonstrations there of, even though I know how to do it, I wasn't allowing enough distance, enough deflection. So you need to practice with that, maybe even take it into a training room to practice. Use supercharger and fine gun, really, please believe me, do, otherwise you are going to miss even more shots. And be aware of its weak points, right? As we said, moving downhill, moving uphill, sides, back, very vulnerable. Going up and down, as we said, use 2 repair kits. You don't want to get stuck coming down or going up a hill in this thing in a tier 10 game, believe me. Typical Tank Destroyer tactics apply here, but remember, you're also fast, so you can move around the map too. You have the option to go support your heavies, the option even to go support your med tanks, so just be aware of that. You have that option in your locker, so just be aware of that. And don't sit still, try to relocate when required, support your team, use your head. Basically, you're playing tier 10, you need to be using your head. It's not just about color by numbers here, you really need to be tactically aware of how the map is going. So cheers Mush, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it useful, and I guess all it remains for me to say is pants off.